The first gunshot echoed through the emergency department just as the night shift changed over. Conversation stopped. A tray crashed onto the floor. Patients screamed as armed men forced their way through the ambulance entrance, shouting orders and firing into the ceiling. Near the medication station, the newest nurse on the floor froze for only a heartbeat. The senior staff had spent weeks dismissing her as slow, quiet, and too inexperienced for trauma care. One doctor had even whispered that she would never survive a real emergency. She lowered her eyes, stepped back from the chaos, and quietly counted the attackers instead of running. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing about her expression matched the panic around her. The gunmen believed they had taken control of the hospital. The staff believed the rookie nurse needed someone to protect her. Before dawn, everyone would realize they had been wrong. The emergency department never truly slept. Even after midnight, ambulance sirens came and went with steady rhythm. Monitors beeped behind half-closed curtains, and exhausted nurses hurried through bright hallways carrying medication trays and patient charts. Every shift began with the same promise that things would calm down soon. They never did. Emily Carter adjusted the badge clipped to her blue scrub top as she stepped through the employee entrance. Her uniform looked exactly like everyone else's, except it still carried the stiffness of someone new to the job. The security guard at the front desk nodded politely. "Night shift again?" he asked. Emily smiled. "Looks that way. You'll get used to it." "I hope so." She continued toward the emergency department without another word. The hallway smelled of disinfectant, fresh coffee, and the faint scent of rain drifting through the ambulance bay each time the automatic doors opened. Inside the nurse's station, the night team was already gathering for handoff. Charge nurse Linda Matthews stood at the center of the room with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. She had worked emergency medicine for nearly 25 years and expected everyone around her to keep the same relentless pace she did. She glanced toward Emily. "You're early. I like having a few extra minutes." Linda shrugged. "You'll learn they disappear fast around here." Several nurses laughed quietly. Emily simply nodded. The patient assignments began. Trauma rooms 1 through 3. Assigned. Pediatrics. Assigned. Observation. Assigned. Linda finally looked back at Emily. "You'll cover medication restocking, supply inventory, and observation beds." Emily accepted the assignment without complaint. Another nurse, Megan, leaned against the counter while checking her schedule. "Still keeping the rookie away from trauma?" Linda answered before Emily could. "I'd rather have someone experienced when the ambulances start stacking up." Megan smiled apologetically toward Emily. "Nothing personal." Emily returned a calm smile. "I understand." No irritation appeared in her voice. No disappointment. She simply picked up the supply cart and walked toward the storage room. Behind her, another nurse whispered quietly enough to think she could not hear. "She's nice. Too quiet. I don't know if she's built for emergency nursing." Emily continued walking as though she had heard nothing at all. The storage room was perfectly organized. Most people grabbed supplies without paying attention. Emily paused. Her eyes moved slowly across every shelf. Airway kits, chest seals, emergency blood, portable oxygen cylinders, defibrillator batteries. She mentally noted every location without writing anything down. Then she looked toward the ceiling. 1 security camera, 1 fire suppression system, 2 exits. She closed the cabinet and pushed the supply cart back into the hallway. Within the first hour, the emergency department filled rapidly. An elderly man struggling to breathe, a teenager with a fractured wrist, a construction worker covered in dust after falling from scaffolding. Emily moved quietly from room to room. She checked medications twice before administering them. She spoke softly to frightened patients. She remembered every allergy without needing reminders. A young boy cried while waiting for stitches. Emily knelt beside him. "Can I show you something?" He nodded cautiously. She folded a latex glove, inflated it into a balloon, and drew a smiling face on it with a marker. "There." The boy smiled for the first time since arriving. His mother laughed through tired eyes. "Thank you." Emily simply nodded. "It's going to be okay." Across the hallway, Dr. Michael Harris watched for a moment before turning back toward another trauma patient. "She's good with people," he admitted. Linda continued reviewing charts. "Kindness isn't enough in this department." Around 2 in the morning, an ambulance radio crackled across the department. "Incoming cardiac arrest. ETA 3 minutes." Instantly, the entire emergency room accelerated. Doctors prepared airway equipment. Respiratory therapists positioned ventilators. Nurses opened medication kits. Emily stepped toward trauma room 2. Linda stopped her. "I've already assigned Megan. I can help. I need you covering observation." Emily nodded once. "Understood." She turned away without arguing. Megan whispered as she hurried past. "Don't worry. You'll get your chance eventually." Emily offered the same quiet smile. "I know." The cardiac patient arrived. Compression after compression. Medication after medication. The room became a storm of controlled urgency. Emily remained outside, assisting another patient while occasionally glancing toward the trauma room windows. Not at the doctors, at the room itself. She noticed where equipment had been moved, which hallway had become blocked, which oxygen cylinder had nearly run empty, which crash cart drawer had been left unlocked. Small details. Details no one else seemed to notice. Near dawn, the emergency department settled into its brief moment of calm. Coffee cups replaced adrenaline. Monitors beeped steadily instead of frantically. Linda approached Emily while reviewing paperwork. "I'll give you credit." Emily looked up. "For what?" "You don't complain. I came here to work." Linda folded her arms. "You've got good instincts with patients." A pause followed. "But instinct isn't experience." Emily accepted the comment without protest. "I still have a lot to learn." Linda nodded once before walking away. From across the station, Megan smiled. "See? She almost complimented you." Emily laughed quietly. "I noticed." The lights outside reflected off the rain-soaked ambulance entrance. Emily looked through the glass for only a second longer than normal. A dark SUV rolled slowly past the emergency entrance before disappearing into the street beyond. No one else seemed to notice. Emily did. She watched until its taillights vanished into the darkness. Then she quietly returned to her patients, unaware that before the next shift ended, every person in the hospital would see the rookie nurse very differently. The rain stopped just before 3 in the morning, leaving the hospital parking lot covered in a thin layer of water that reflected every ambulance light like broken glass. Inside the emergency department, the brief quiet from the previous hour had already disappeared. Another ambulance arrived. Then another. Emily Carter accepted the next patient without hesitation, helping transfer an elderly woman suffering from severe dehydration onto a treatment bed. Her movements were smooth, economical, and deliberate. She adjusted the oxygen tubing, checked the patient's identification band, confirmed medication allergies, and spoke in a calm voice that never seemed rushed, even when everything around her was. "You are safe," she told the woman gently. "We're going to take good care of you." The woman's breathing eased. Across the room, Dr. Michael Harris noticed it again. Emily never wasted motion. Every step seemed planned before she took it. He dismissed the thought and continued reviewing laboratory results. The emergency department remained crowded. Stretchers lined portions of the hallway because every treatment room was occupied. Children cried behind curtains. Monitors produced their steady chorus of electronic beeps, while overhead speakers announced incoming trauma patients every few minutes. For most of the staff, it was simply another exhausting night. For Emily, something no longer felt normal. She carried fresh intravenous supplies toward trauma room 3 and glanced through the large glass doors leading to the ambulance entrance. A black SUV sat across the street with its headlights off. The vehicle itself was not unusual. Hospitals attracted visitors at every hour. What caught her attention was that no one entered or exited. The engine remained running. She continued walking without staring. A minute later, she returned with another supply cart. The SUV was still there, exactly where it had been. The windshield reflected the parking lot lights, hiding anyone inside. Emily said nothing. She finished stocking airway equipment before quietly walking to the nurse's station. "Linda." The charge nurse barely looked up. "What is it?" "I noticed a vehicle outside that has been parked for several minutes." Linda continued signing paperwork. "So, it may be nothing." "It probably is." Emily nodded. "I just thought someone should know." Linda sighed. "We're an emergency department. People wait outside all night." "I understand." Emily walked away without another word. Behind her, Megan gave a sympathetic smile. "Don't take it personally. Linda doesn't have enough patience left for anyone." Emily smiled faintly. "I know." She truly did. People under constant pressure often ignored quiet observations because louder problems demanded immediate attention. She returned to work. Half an hour later, a maintenance technician rolled a ladder into the hallway beneath one of the ceiling-mounted security cameras. Emily happened to pass him while delivering medication. "Everything all right?" she asked. The technician scratched his head. "This camera keeps losing signal. Just this one, and another near the ambulance entrance." "When did it start?" He shrugged. "About 20 minutes ago." He climbed the ladder again, replacing a cable connection before shaking his head. "Still dead." Emily thanked him and continued walking. 2 cameras. Same side of the building. Close to the ambulance entrance. Again, none of it proved anything. Individually, each detail was ordinary. Together, they began forming a pattern she could not ignore. At 4 o'clock, the waiting room became unusually restless. A security officer approached the front desk. "Has anyone seen a man wearing a gray hooded jacket?" Several reception staff shook their heads. "He walked in about 10 minutes ago," the officer explained. "Now nobody can find him. Maybe he left." "Maybe." The officer continued searching. Emily watched him disappear down another hallway. Hospitals were confusing buildings. Lost visitors happened every day. Still, she remembered the gray jacket. The man had entered through the main doors. He had looked toward the emergency department before disappearing from view. She had noticed because he never looked at the reception desk. Only at the exits. Only at the cameras. Only at the ambulance entrance. Minutes later, Emily entered the medication storage room. She paused. One cabinet door stood slightly open. She was certain she had closed it earlier. Nothing appeared missing. Nothing appeared disturbed. She shut the cabinet quietly. Her eyes scanned the room. Ventilation duct. Emergency exit. Telephone. Fire extinguisher. Everything appeared normal. Yet the uneasy feeling remained. Dr. Harris found her reorganizing emergency airway kits. "You've already done that." Emily looked up. "I know. So why again?" She hesitated before answering. "I like knowing exactly where everything is." He smiled. "You are either very organized or obsessive?" He laughed. "I wasn't going to say that." Emily smiled politely. "In emergencies, people lose time searching." He nodded. "That's true." She returned another laryngoscope to its drawer. "I don't like wasting time." Something about the answer lingered with him longer than expected. Just after 4:30, the radio dispatcher announced multiple traffic accident victims arriving within the hour. The department shifted immediately into preparation mode. Extra stretchers appeared. Blood supplies were moved closer to trauma rooms. Respiratory equipment was checked. Emily volunteered without being asked. "I'll prepare the pediatric observation rooms." Linda nodded absent-mindedly. "Go." Within minutes, every room was stocked beyond normal requirements. Extra oxygen, additional intravenous fluids, portable monitors with fully charged batteries, emergency medications verified twice. Megan noticed. "You always prepare more than everyone else." Emily tightened the strap on an emergency trauma bag. "I prefer having something I don't need." "You expect disasters." "I prepare for possibilities." Megan laughed. "You sound older than you are." Emily simply zipped the bag closed. Outside, another dark SUV slowly entered the hospital parking lot. It did not park beside the first one. Instead, it circled once before disappearing behind the loading dock. Emily happened to glance through a side window as it passed. Different vehicle. Same dark color. No hospital markings. No visitor pass. She memorized the license plate automatically, a habit she no longer questioned. At 5 o'clock, the emergency department lights flickered. The emergency department had settled into the strange rhythm that comes just before dawn. Some patients slept beneath thin hospital blankets. Others stared at the ceiling, waiting for test results that seemed to take forever. Nurses moved more quietly now, speaking in lower voices so they would not wake children or elderly patients resting behind drawn curtains. Emily Carter stood at the medication station reviewing a chart. She confirmed a dosage, signed the electronic record, and carried a syringe toward observation room 4. Nothing around her appeared unusual, yet the feeling that had followed her all night refused to disappear. As she passed the glass doors leading to the ambulance entrance, she noticed something that made her stop for less than a second. The black SUVs were gone. Not driving away. Gone. Every one of them. She looked toward the entrance again. Empty. Her pulse remained steady. People preparing for something rarely stayed in one place. They moved only when it was time. Emily quietly placed the medication on the patient's bedside table. "I'll be right back." The elderly man smiled weakly. "No rush." She returned to the nurse's station. "Linda." The charge nurse looked up from a stack of laboratory reports. "What is it now?" Emily kept her voice calm. "I think we should secure the ambulance entrance." Linda frowned. "Why?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" "I just have a bad feeling." Linda rubbed her forehead. "We have 28 patients waiting, 2 ambulances inbound, and 1 physician already covering double assignments." "I understand. I can't lock down an emergency entrance because of a feeling." Emily nodded once. "I understand." She walked away. Linda watched her for a moment before returning to her paperwork. Across the department, Dr. Michael Harris removed his gloves after finishing a procedure. "You look distracted," he said as Emily replaced medical supplies. "I'm thinking." "About what?" She hesitated. "How quickly could we move the pediatric patients if we had to?" Dr. Harris smiled tiredly. "You ask unusual questions." "I'm serious." "So am I." He leaned against the counter. "What exactly worries you?" Emily looked toward the ambulance doors. "I can't explain it." He followed her gaze. The entrance stood quiet beneath bright exterior lights. Nothing moved. "No ambulances," he said. "They're overdue." Before Emily could answer, the overhead radio crackled. "Medic 12 to emergency department." Static interrupted the transmission. "Repeat." More static. Then silence. The speaker went dead. Dr. Harris frowned. "That's strange." The dispatcher always repeated unfinished calls. This time, nothing followed. The emergency department continued working. 30 seconds passed. Then 1 minute. Emily quietly counted in her head. At 90 seconds, the automatic ambulance door slid open. No ambulance entered. Only cold night air drifted inside. Everyone looked up. The doors remained open for 3 long seconds. Then they closed again. A receptionist laughed nervously. "Sensor must be acting up." No one answered. The first gunshot shattered the silence. The sound echoed through the ambulance bay like an explosion trapped inside concrete walls. For one impossible second, nobody moved. Several staff members looked at one another, uncertain whether they had actually heard it. Then came the second shot. Glass burst inward. The automatic doors exploded into thousands of glittering fragments. Patients screamed. Someone shouted. A child began crying. 5 armed men rushed through the ruined entrance wearing dark tactical clothing, body armor, and masks that concealed everything except their eyes. Their rifles swept across the room with practiced control. One fired another round into the ceiling. Pieces of plaster rained onto the floor. "Everybody down." The command echoed across the emergency department. Doctors dropped beside treatment beds. Visitors covered their children. A nurse collapsed behind the reception desk. Monitors continued beeping as though nothing had changed. Emily lowered herself beside the medication station with everyone else. Outwardly, she looked exactly as frightened as the rest. Inside, her breathing slowed. Her mind became perfectly still. 5 attackers. She counted automatically. Leader. 2nd covering left corridor. 3rd securing reception. 4th watching ambulance entrance. 5th carrying additional equipment. No unnecessary movement. No panic. Professionally organized. One of the gunmen kicked away a security officer's radio before forcing him onto the floor. Another pulled the main entrance doors closed and locked them from the inside, using heavy restraints carried in a duffel bag. This had been planned. Carefully, the leader stepped onto the center of the emergency department floor. "No one moves." His voice was calm, not angry, not excited, simply controlled. "If you cooperate, you live." He pointed towards several doctors. You, and you. Stand." Slowly, 3 physicians obeyed. "Treat anyone we tell you to treat." The doctors nodded silently. The leader looked across the room. "Nurses stay where they are." Emily kept her eyes lowered. She appeared small, quiet, harmless. Exactly what he expected to see. One attacker moved toward the security office. Another disconnected landline telephones. A 3rd collected everyone's mobile phones inside a plastic medical waste container. No one resisted. The emergency department became isolated within minutes. Outside help would not know exactly what was happening. Emily noticed every step, every assignment, every weakness. One gunman repeatedly checked his wristwatch. Another favored his right knee. The youngest attacker constantly looked over his shoulder instead of watching the hostages. Inexperience. Fear. The leader noticed everything. The youngest noticed too much. A frightened patient suddenly tried to run. The middle-aged man sprinted toward a side hallway. One gunman swung his rifle toward him. Emily moved without thinking. Stop. Her voice cut through the room. Everyone froze. Even the gunman hesitated. The patient stopped running. Emily looked directly at him. If you run now, someone else dies. The room fell completely silent. The patient slowly lowered his hands. I'm sorry. Emily nodded gently. Sit down. He obeyed. The gunman stared at her for several seconds, then lowered his rifle. The leader watched the exchange carefully. You. He pointed at Emily. The nurse. She stood slowly. Yes. You kept him alive. I prevented panic. He studied her face. You're new. Yes. For the first 10 minutes after the takeover, nothing happened. That frightened the hostages more than the gunfire. The 5 armed men no longer shouted. They had established control, and now they moved with measured discipline. One guarded the ambulance entrance. Another watched the main hallway, while the remaining 3 positioned themselves where they could see nearly every patient and member of staff. The emergency department became unnaturally quiet. Heart monitors continued their steady rhythm. Intravenous pumps clicked softly. Somewhere deeper in the hospital, an overhead paging system announced a physician to another floor, unaware that the emergency department had become the center of a hostage crisis. Emily Carter knelt beside the elderly woman she had been treating before the attack. The woman's hands shook uncontrollably. My husband, she whispered. He was in the waiting room. Emily adjusted the oxygen mask. Keep taking slow breaths. I need to find him. You will. You don't know that. Emily met her eyes. No, she answered honestly. But panicking will not help either of you. The woman's breathing gradually slowed. Across the room, Dr. Michael Harris watched Emily work. She never promised what she could not guarantee. She simply gave people something they could still control. Their next breath. Their next decision. It was a small thing. Yet in that room, it mattered. The leader walked between the rows of patients with his rifle hanging low but ready. He stopped in front of Emily. You're the quiet one. She looked up. I'm just doing my job. You don't seem scared. I am. You hide it well. Emily lowered her eyes again. My patients need me calm. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he moved on. She waited until he was several steps away before exhaling slowly. She had learned long ago that confidence attracted attention. Fear made people invisible. Tonight, invisible was exactly where she wanted to stay. Near the pediatric observation area, a little girl began crying loudly. She could not have been older than 6. Her father tried to comfort her, but the sound echoed through the department. One of the younger gunmen became visibly irritated. Make her stop. The father held his daughter tighter. I'm trying. The gunman stepped closer. I said make her stop. Emily stood. I can help. The gunman turned toward her. Sit down. If she keeps crying, everyone becomes more frightened. He hesitated. The leader looked over. Let the nurse go. Emily walked slowly toward the child, careful not to move too quickly. She crouched beside the bed. What is your name? The little girl sniffled. Sophie. I'm Emily. The child buried her face against her father's shoulder. Emily removed a folded examination glove from her pocket. She inflated it and tied the end, creating another simple balloon. Using a pen clipped inside her scrub pocket, she drew 2 tiny eyes and a smile. I think he looks nervous. Despite herself, Sophie smiled through her tears. He looks funny. I think he's afraid of hospitals. The little girl giggled quietly. The crying stopped. Emily handed her the small glove balloon. Can you help him be brave? Sophie nodded seriously. I can. The gunman watched the entire exchange. He looked away first. The emergency department settled once more. Emily returned to the medication station. As she walked, she noticed several details. One attacker had removed his gloves. His left hand carried fresh powder burns. Another repeatedly adjusted the sling of his rifle. Poor fit. Limited training with that particular weapon. The youngest man kept checking the hallway behind him every few seconds. He was nervous. People who were nervous became predictable. Emily stored every observation without reacting. Not yet. Dr. Harris approached while pretending to organize medical charts. He spoke so quietly that only Emily could hear. You noticed something. She continued writing. Everyone leaves patterns. What kind? The one near pediatrics is losing focus. You figured that out already? I watched his eyes. Dr. Harris stared at her. You've done this before. Emily looked at him. No. Then she returned to her chart. It was not a lie. She had never experienced this exact situation. But she understood fear. She understood discipline. She understood how quickly control disappeared when people became tired. A sharp alarm interrupted the silence. One of the cardiac monitors began warning of dangerously low oxygen levels. The patient inside trauma room 1 was deteriorating rapidly. A doctor instinctively moved toward the room. The leader stopped him. What happens if you wait? He dies. The leader looked toward Emily. You. She stepped forward. Can you stabilize him? Yes. Then do it. Emily entered the trauma room, carrying only what she needed. Inside, the patient struggled to breathe. His oxygen tubing had become kinked beneath the bed rail during the earlier chaos. Emily corrected the tubing. The monitor numbers improved almost immediately. She checked his airway, adjusted medication flow, confirmed blood pressure. Within less than a minute, the alarm stopped. The patient remained alive. She quietly documented everything before leaving the room. No dramatic gestures. No unnecessary speed. Only precise, practiced nursing. Outside, one of the gunmen frowned. That was fast. The leader answered without taking his eyes off Emily. She's competent. As the hours passed, fatigue slowly entered the room. Even armed men could not remain fully alert forever. Emily noticed it first. The youngest attacker accepted a bottle of water. Another removed his helmet for several seconds. The leader checked his watch repeatedly. They were waiting for something. Or someone. Waiting created impatience. Impatience created mistakes. Emily glanced toward the overhead lights. She remembered every emergency exit, every oxygen shutoff valve, every storage room, every blind corner between treatment areas. The hospital itself was becoming part of her calculations, not because she intended to attack, because she intended to protect. If movement became necessary, every second would matter. Suddenly, an elderly patient collapsed beside his stretcher. His blood pressure had fallen dangerously low. Family members cried for help. Several nurses instinctively rushed forward. One gunman raised his rifle. No one moves. Emily lifted one hand calmly. If we don't reach him now, he won't survive. The leader studied the scene, then nodded once. 3 nurses. No one else. Emily immediately organized the response. A hostage situation changed with every passing minute. Fear settled. Adrenaline faded. People grew tired. That was when discipline mattered most. Emily Carter remained exactly where the gunman expected her to be, moving quietly between patients, checking medications, adjusting intravenous lines, comforting frightened families. To everyone watching, she was simply doing her job. Only Emily understood that every trip across the emergency department allowed her to observe something new. The leader favored the center of the room because it gave him the widest view. The youngest gunman had stopped checking his corners and now watched the police lights flashing outside instead. The man guarding the ambulance entrance shifted his rifle from shoulder to shoulder every few minutes. His lower back was beginning to tighten. Fatigue was slowly replacing precision. Emily carried a tray of antibiotics toward observation room 2. As she passed a supply cabinet, she noticed the door had not been fully closed after the earlier medical emergency. Inside were portable oxygen cylinders, trauma bags, blankets, and emergency evacuation equipment. She closed the cabinet gently, not because it needed closing, because she wanted to know later if someone else had opened it. Outside, police negotiators had established contact. A portable loudspeaker echoed through the shattered ambulance entrance. This is the police. We want everyone to leave safely. We are prepared to talk. The leader did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the department. No one speaks. Silence returned. Then he walked toward the broken doorway and shouted only one sentence. No one comes inside. He stepped back. Negotiations had begun. Emily listened carefully, not to the words, to the timing. Every conversation with police divided the attention of whoever was speaking. Small windows appeared, sometimes only for seconds. Seconds could save lives. Near the pediatric area, Sophie tugged gently on Emily's sleeve. My dad is shaking. Emily knelt beside them. The little girl's father looked pale, not from fear alone. She checked his wrist. His pulse was rapid. His breathing was shallow. Panic attack. She spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. Look at me. He tried. I can't. Yes, you can. He forced himself to meet her eyes. Count with me. She slowly raised 4 fingers. In. He inhaled. Hold. He held his breath. Out. The rhythm gradually slowed his breathing. After several cycles, his hands stopped trembling. Better? Emily asked. He nodded weakly. Thank you. She smiled. You helped yourself. The exchange lasted less than 2 minutes. But one of the gunmen had been watching. You've done that before. Emily stood. Emergency nurses see frightened people every day. He seemed satisfied. She hoped he stayed that way. The department lights flickered again. Only once. Several monitors reset themselves before returning to normal. One of the gunmen looked toward the ceiling. What was that? The leader answered without concern. Old building. Emily silently disagreed. The flicker had lasted exactly long enough to interrupt electronics, but not long enough to activate backup generators. Someone outside was testing electrical systems. Or preparing for something. She filed the thought away. Dr. Harris quietly approached while pretending to organize medications. You keep looking at the lights. Emily continued checking expiration dates. They're telling me something. What? They haven't failed. They flickered. Exactly. He frowned. I don't understand. They're measuring. Who? I don't know. That answer bothered him more than certainty would have. A sudden cry echoed from trauma room 3. The wounded security officer had begun bleeding through his bandages. One attacker immediately pointed his rifle toward the room. Fix him. Emily grabbed fresh dressings. Inside the room, the security officer recognized her immediately. They're listening, he whispered. I know. I tried reaching dispatch. I know. His eyes widened slightly. You noticed everything. Emily carefully replaced the soaked bandages. You've lost more blood than I'd like. He managed a tired smile. You sound calm. I need you calm. As she tightened the pressure dressing, she quietly slid a small folded piece of gauze beneath his hand. Nothing unusual, except she folded it in a very specific pattern. The officer looked down, then back at her. His expression changed only slightly, almost invisibly. He understood. It was not a message. It was a reminder. Stay patient. Wait. Do nothing. She finished the bandage. You'll be all right. He nodded. I believe you. The youngest gunman grew increasingly restless. How much longer? The leader never looked at him. As long as necessary. They're surrounding us. I know. We should move. We stay. The younger man fell silent. Emily noticed the exchange. Stress inside the group was growing. Disagreement always weakened control. A sharp metallic crash echoed from the far supply hallway. Every rifle turned toward the sound. One gunman hurried to investigate. Emily looked in the same direction as everyone else. Nothing moved. 30 seconds later, the man returned. Nothing. The leader frowned. What fell? I don't know. Emily lowered her eyes. Earlier, while delivering medication, she had noticed a stack of folded wheelchairs leaning against the wall with one while hanging over the edge. She had gently nudged it into a less stable position while pretending to retrieve a blanket. Gravity had done the rest. No trap. No attack. Only a harmless distraction. But for 30 seconds, one rifle had pointed somewhere else. She now knew exactly how the gunman reacted to unexpected sounds. Information mattered. More than action. Negotiators called again from outside. We have medical supplies if anyone inside needs them. The leader laughed once. We're already inside a hospital. His men smiled nervously. It was the first time Emily had seen any of them relax. Only for a moment, but enough. People became careless immediately after laughing. Linda quietly stepped beside Emily. I owe you an apology. Emily looked up. For what? I thought you froze under pressure. Emily shook her head. No, I was wrong. Emily returned to preparing medications. We all make judgments. Linda watched her. Where did you learn to stay this calm? Emily paused. My first instructor taught me that panic spreads faster than bleeding. Linda smiled faintly. That's a strange lesson for nursing school. Emily looked at her. The emergency department smelled of antiseptic, sweat, and shattered concrete. Hours had passed since the gunmen stormed the hospital. Dawn was beginning to brighten the sky outside, turning the broken glass near the ambulance entrance pale blue. The flashing police lights were still visible beyond the barricaded doors, but inside, time felt trapped. Emily Carter checked the foreline of a trauma patient while listening to the room around her. One gunman was pacing. Another had stopped talking altogether. The leader remained composed, but even he was beginning to show signs of fatigue. His shoulders were tighter now, his attention drifting for a second or two whenever the negotiators called from outside. Those seconds mattered. Emily was counting them. A sudden alarm pierced the department. A cardiac monitor in observation room 3 erupted into a rapid, irregular tone. Dr. Harris looked up immediately. That's ventricular tachycardia. The patient, a middle-aged woman recovering from a severe infection, was deteriorating fast. The leader raised his rifle. What does that mean? It means she could die in minutes, Dr. Harris answered. Emily was already moving toward the room when the leader stepped into her path. Stop. She met his eyes. If we wait, she arrests. He studied her for a long moment, then lowered the rifle slightly. Go. The doctor stays where I can see him. Emily entered the room alone. The woman's heart rhythm was dangerously unstable. Emily checked the monitor, confirmed the reading, and reached for emergency medication. Her movements were calm, almost quiet. Draw the drug. Verify the dose. Flush the line. Reassess. The rhythm improved briefly, then worsened again. She needed the defibrillator. Clear, she called. The shock lifted the woman's body slightly from the bed. The monitor flickered. Then a pulse returned. Emily exhaled slowly and adjusted the oxygen mask. You're still with me, she said softly. The woman's eyelids fluttered. When Emily stepped back into the hallway, Dr. Harris was staring at her. That was textbook. She simply handed him the medication record. Document the shock at 200 joules. He took the chart, but did not look away. You've done that before. Emily answered without emotion. Yes. Before he could ask where, shouting erupted near the pediatric area. One of the gunmen had grabbed a teenage boy who had tried to move toward his injured mother. The rifle was pressed against the boy's shoulder. I told everyone to stay put. The boy was trembling. I just wanted to help her. The leader started toward them, but Emily spoke first. He's not a threat. The gunman snapped, stay out of this. He's scared. So am I. The admission hung in the air. For the first time, Emily saw the man beneath the weapon, young, exhausted, and losing control. She took a slow step forward, keeping her hands visible. If you hurt him, the whole room panics. Then you lose control too. The gunman's breathing was uneven. Emily lowered her voice. Let me move the mother closer to him. He'll stay where you can see him. A long silence followed. Then the rifle lowered. Do it. Emily guided the injured woman's stretcher beside her son. The boy grabbed his mother's hand, fighting back tears. Thank you, he whispered. Emily only nodded and stepped away. The leader watched the entire exchange with narrowed eyes. You talk people down like it's routine. I talk to frightened people for a living. That's not what I meant. She gave him nothing else. Minutes later, the lights flickered again, harder this time. Several monitors went dark for a second before returning on battery power. A murmur spread through the hostages. One of the gunmen swore under his breath. The leader immediately looked toward the ceiling, then toward the shattered entrance. Emily recognized the pattern. The police were testing the electrical grid again. If power was cut completely, the emergency department would fall into darkness except for emergency lighting. The gunman knew it too, and fear was beginning to spread through them faster than through the hostages. The wounded security officer suddenly cried out. Fresh blood was spreading through his bandages. Emily moved instantly, but as she knelt beside him, a jagged piece of glass hidden beneath a discarded blanket sliced across her forearm. The cut was deep enough to bleed immediately. Megan gasped. Emily, I'm fine. Blood ran down her wrist, but she kept pressure on the security officer's wound with her other hand. More gauze, she said calmly. Linda handed it over. You need that looked at. Later. The security officer was growing pale. Emily tightened the dressing, elevated the wound, and started another foreline while blood continued dripping from her own arm onto the floor. One of the gunmen stared at her. You're bleeding. She's still working, Dr. Harris said before he could stop himself. The leader looked between them. Treat yourself. Emily shook her head. He comes first. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the leader stepped back. Finish it. Only after the officer stabilized did Emily finally wrap her own arm with a pressure bandage. Her fingers moved efficiently despite the pain. Dr. Harris crouched beside her. That cut needs stitches. I know. You're losing blood. Not enough to matter yet. He lowered his voice. Who are you? Emily tied the bandage and looked directly at him. Right now, I'm the nurse keeping your patients alive. It was not really an answer, and they both knew it. Outside, a police negotiator called through the loudspeaker again. "We can provide medical evacuation for the critically injured." The leader walked toward the entrance, but did not respond. Emily watched his posture. He was thinking about options now, not demands. That was new. Then another sound reached her, faint, almost lost beneath the sirens. A helicopter, far away, approaching. The leader heard it too. His head turned sharply toward the sky. One of his men became visibly nervous. "Are they sending tactical teams?" "Quiet," the leader snapped. But the question had already poisoned the room. The gunmen were no longer focused on the hostages. They were beginning to imagine what was coming for them. Emily looked down at the blood seeping through the edge of her bandage. The pain was real. The fatigue was real. And for the first time since the siege began, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She could probably end this faster if she stopped pretending to be only a rookie nurse. She had seen opportunities. Angles. The sound of rotor blades rolled across the hospital roof. It was still distant, but inside the emergency department, every armed man heard it. The leader turned toward the shattered ambulance entrance. For the first time since the siege began, his confidence showed a crack. "They're moving," one of the younger gunmen said. "They were always going to move," the leader replied. "They'll come through the roof." "They might." "They'll come through the walls." "They might." "What do we do?" The leader looked at him with cold eyes. "We stick to the plan." The younger man nodded, but his hands betrayed him. His grip tightened around his rifle. His breathing became shallow. Emily Carter noticed all of it while replacing an empty bag. Fear was spreading through the gunmen faster than through the hostages. That changed everything. Outside, the negotiator spoke again through the loudspeaker. "This is your final opportunity to release the injured." The leader ignored him. Instead, he ordered two of his men toward the ambulance entrance. "You watch outside." Another remained near pediatrics. The youngest guarded the nurse's station. Their formation had changed. Emily had been waiting for that. For nearly 3 hours, they had maintained overlapping fields of view. Now, because of pressure from outside, they had begun watching different directions. Blind spots appeared. Small. Temporary. Enough. She walked calmly toward the medication room, carrying an empty tray. The youngest gunman stepped into her path. "Where are you going?" "More saline." "You don't need it." "A child does." He hesitated. The leader looked over briefly. "Let her." Emily entered the room. The door remained open. Inside, everything appeared exactly as she remembered. Shelves of fluids, emergency medication, portable oxygen cylinders, trauma kits. She filled the tray with saline bags. Then, while hidden for only a second behind the open cabinet door, she quietly loosened the valve on a portable oxygen cylinder, not enough to create danger, only enough that it would begin releasing a faint hiss after several minutes. A sound. Nothing more. She closed the valve almost completely. By the time she returned to the hallway, no one noticed anything unusual. The first hiss came 5 minutes later. Soft, barely audible. The youngest gunman frowned. What was that? Another attacker looked toward the supply room. "I heard it too." The leader motioned with his rifle. "Check it." The man disappeared into the room. Emily continued adjusting a patient's blanket. She did not look toward the doorway. She counted silently. 1, 2, 3. A voice echoed from inside. "Just oxygen." The attacker tightened the valve and walked back out. Nothing had happened, except one guard had left his position, exactly as she expected. The police helicopter circled again, this time much lower. The youngest gunman lost his composure. "They're coming." "Hold your position," the leader ordered. "We're trapped." "Hold. I said we're trapped." His voice echoed through the emergency department. Patients began crying again. The leader stepped toward him. Before he could speak, the frightened gunman swung around toward the hostages. His rifle swept across the room. Too quickly, too wildly. Emily moved. Not toward him, toward the frightened people. Everyone down. Her voice was calm, firm, without panic. Almost every patient obeyed instinctively. Doctors dropped beside beds. Parents covered their children. The room flattened. The gunman's aim suddenly had no clear target. The leader shoved the barrel downward. "What are you doing?" The younger man stared back. "They're coming." "I know." The argument lasted only seconds. But seconds were enough. The elderly security officer Emily had stabilized earlier quietly rolled his empty wheelchair several inches with his foot. Its metal wheel struck a nearby four-pole. The pole tipped. It crashed loudly onto the floor. Every head turned, including the youngest gunmen's. Emily acted immediately. She grabbed the little girl, Sophie, and pulled her behind the heavy nurse's station. Megan understood instantly. She pulled two more children down beside her. Linda guided several elderly patients behind treatment beds. Dr. Harris helped move the cardiac patient away from the open hallway. No one shouted. No one ran. Emily had spent hours showing them how to stay calm. Now they followed that example. The youngest gunman realized what was happening. They're moving. He raised his rifle. Before he could fire, the leader struck the weapon aside. You idiot. The shot exploded harmlessly into the ceiling. Sprinkler pipes burst. Water poured across the emergency department. Within seconds, alarms activated. Emergency lights switched on. The main lights went out. The room fell into dim red illumination. Visibility dropped instantly. The gunman cursed. Emily didn't. The emergency lighting outlined every hallway exactly as she had memorized them hours earlier. She knew where every bed stood, every cabinet, every doorway, every obstacle. The attackers didn't. Water streamed across the polished floor. One gunman slipped while backing toward the ambulance entrance. His rifle slid several feet away. Instead of rushing him, Emily kicked the weapon farther beneath an overturned stretcher while helping a frightened patient to safety. The gunman scrambled after it, losing precious seconds. Another attacker became separated from the others by rows of hospital beds that had shifted during the confusion. The leader shouted commands. His team answered from different directions. Control was disappearing, not because someone had attacked them, because panic had finally reached them. The youngest gunman appeared at the end of a hallway, breathing heavily. His rifle shook in his hands. He saw Emily helping Sophie and her father through a side treatment room. Stop. Emily slowly turned. The child clung to her leg. The gunman pointed the rifle toward them. His finger trembled on the trigger. Emily looked directly into his eyes. You don't want to do this. Don't move. You've been afraid since you came inside. Be quiet. You've made it this far without killing anyone. His breathing became faster. They'll kill us. I know what fear feels like. He blinked. Put the weapon down. I can't. You still can. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the rifle lowered. Only a few inches. Enough. The leader appeared behind him. What are you doing? The younger man hesitated. That hesitation ended everything. The emergency department was quiet again. Not the ordinary quiet of a hospital before sunrise, but the heavy silence that follows violence. Water still dripped from the broken sprinkler pipes. Shattered glass covered the ambulance entrance. Discarded medical supplies lay scattered across the floor beside abandoned rifles that had already been secured by police evidence teams. The hostages were alive. Some were crying. Some sat motionless, unable to process what had happened. Others simply watched the nurses move from patient to patient, restoring the ordinary routines that suddenly felt extraordinary. Emily Carter tightened the bandage on her forearm and walked toward the first patient who needed her. She did not look outside. She did not look at the police. She simply returned to work. Blood pressure is 98/60. Dr. Harris looked up. Let's repeat it in 5 minutes. Emily nodded. She adjusted the pump and gently reassured the elderly woman who had spent most of the night worrying about her husband. They found him. The woman looked up. He survived. Yes. Tears filled her eyes. Emily squeezed her hand. You can see him soon. The woman smiled through tears. Thank you. Emily gave a small nod and quietly moved to the next patient. Detectives entered the emergency department one by one, documenting the scene. Crime scene photographers captured images of damaged equipment. Evidence technicians marked shell casings with small yellow numbered markers. Uniformed officers interviewed frightened staff members. Everyone had questions. Everyone except Emily. She was replacing an oxygen cylinder. Officer Daniel Brooks approached Dr. Harris. We're beginning witness interviews. Dr. Harris nodded. Anything you need. The officer glanced toward Emily. The nurse. Emily. Yes. We'll need her statement too. Dr. Harris looked across the room. She hasn't stopped working. The officer followed his gaze. Emily was helping Megan transfer an elderly cardiac patient onto a clean bed. Despite the cut on her arm, despite everything she had been through, she worked with the same calm precision she had shown before the attack. The officer frowned. How long has she worked here? 3 weeks. Only 3. That's right. The officer remained silent. Something about that answer clearly surprised him. Outside the shattered entrance, black government SUVs rolled quietly into the secured hospital perimeter. Unlike the earlier vehicles, these carried official plates. Several people in plain clothes stepped out. Their appearance was almost forgettable. Dark suits, simple jackets, no visible insignia. Yet the police officers nearest the vehicles immediately straightened their posture. The senior detective walked directly toward them. A brief conversation followed. Heads turned toward the emergency department, then toward Emily. Inside, Linda noticed first. Emily. She looked up from a patient chart. Yes, I think they're here for you. Emily followed Linda's gaze toward the entrance. 3 unfamiliar individuals were approaching. The man in front appeared to be in his late 50s. Gray hair, dark overcoat, no visible rank. His posture alone suggested decades of disciplined service. He entered quietly, removing a pair of leather gloves. The police captain met him halfway. Sir. The older man acknowledged him with a nod. Where is she? The captain looked toward Emily. Over there. The man thanked him and walked across the damaged emergency department. Every officer instinctively stepped aside as he passed. No one had asked them to. They simply did. Emily finished checking a patient's pulse before turning. For the first time that night, her expression softened. Only slightly. The older man stopped several feet away. Neither of them spoke immediately. Then he looked at the bandage on her arm. You should have that stitched. Emily answered quietly. I've had worse. I know. Dr. Harris looked between them. You know each other? The older man finally looked toward the gathered staff. His eyes settled briefly on Linda, then Megan, then Dr. Harris. Finally, he spoke. You've been working with someone remarkable. The room became completely silent. Linda frowned. I'm sorry, who are you? He reached slowly into his coat. Several police officers instinctively watched his hands. He produced a simple black identification wallet. Only the captain examined it closely. His expression changed immediately. Understood, sir. He handed it back without another question. No explanation was offered. None was requested. Dr. Harris looked at Emily. What's happening? Emily remained silent. The older man answered instead. Miss Carter has served her country with distinction. Linda blinked. In the military? He gave a small nod. Yes. Megan smiled in disbelief. She was a combat medic? The older man paused. Among other responsibilities. Emily quietly interrupted. That's enough. He looked at her. They deserve to know why they are alive. They deserve patients who are recovering. For a long moment, the older man simply studied her. Then he smiled faintly. Still the same. The police captain approached carefully. Sir, our tactical team reported several moments during the siege that prevented casualties. The older man nodded once. I've read the preliminary reports. He looked toward Emily. Exactly what I expected. Dr. Harris finally spoke the question everyone had been holding. Who are you? Emily looked at the floor for a moment. Then back at him. I used to wear a different uniform. Military. Yes. Special operations? She didn't answer. The silence itself became an answer. The older man broke it gently. There are some records that will remain classified. No one spoke after that. One of the younger police officers approached the captain quietly. Sir, what is it? The tactical team said whoever managed the hostages understood room clearing, overlapping fields of fire, stress behavior, and tactical movement. The captain nodded. They were correct. The young officer looked toward Emily with renewed respect. Emily picked up another chart. Room 12 needed fresh antibiotics. A child needed reassurance before receiving stitches. An elderly man wanted to know when he could see his wife. Life inside the emergency department was moving forward. That mattered more to her than any conversation. As she walked away, the older man called after her. Carter. She stopped. You handled yourself well. Emily turned. So did the nurses. He smiled. I'll include that in my report. She gave a single nod. The sun rose quietly over the city. Golden lights spread across the hospital parking lot, washing away the flashing blue and red reflections that had dominated the night. Police vehicles were still lined along the entrance, but the urgency had faded. Crime scene investigators packed away equipment while contractors measured the shattered ambulance doors for replacement. The emergency department looked exhausted. Broken ceiling tiles had been cleared into large plastic bins. The pools of water left by the burst sprinkler pipes had been mopped away. Fresh sheets covered the stretchers. The smell of gunpowder had slowly been replaced by disinfectant. The hospital was beginning the difficult work of looking ordinary again. Emily Carter stood at a sink, carefully washing dried blood from her hands. Most of it wasn't hers. She removed the temporary bandage from her forearm and examined the cut. It was deep enough to require stitches. She reached for a sterile dressing. "You finally stopped." Dr. Michael Harris stood in the doorway holding a small suture kit. Emily smiled faintly. "The patients are stable. So now you're the patient." She looked at the wound again. "I suppose I am." He pulled up a chair. "Sit." Emily obeyed without argument. For the first time since the first gunshot, someone else was taking care of her. Dr. Harris cleaned the wound carefully. "You should have let someone do this hours ago." "There wasn't time." "There would have been." She shook her head. "There were people in worse condition." He looked up. "You always put yourself last." Emily considered the question. "Not always. When putting myself first helps someone else." He smiled quietly. "That's a complicated answer." "It usually is." He began placing the first stitch. Emily didn't flinch. "You really don't react to pain much." "I react." "You just hide it." She looked out the window. "Sometimes." Neither of them spoke for a while. Only the quiet sound of surgical thread passing through skin filled the room. Across the department, Megan was helping restock medication cabinets. She stopped beside Linda. "I still can't believe it." Linda closed a patient file. "Neither can I. I kept calling her the rookie." Linda smiled sadly. "She never corrected us." "No. She just kept working." Megan looked toward Emily. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone stay that calm." Linda folded her arms. "Experience teaches confidence." "Military experience?" Linda shrugged. "Whatever she did before. It taught her something that nursing school never could." The elderly woman Emily had cared for throughout the night slowly walked toward the nurse's station with her husband beside her. Both had been discharged. The woman carried a small paper cup containing the hospital coffee she had barely touched. She stopped in front of Emily. "I wanted to say goodbye." Emily stood. "I'm glad you're both safe." The woman reached into her purse. "I don't have much." She placed a small silver cross on the counter. "It belonged to my mother." Emily gently pushed it back. "You should keep it. I want you to have it." Emily smiled. "The best gift you can give me." She looked toward the woman's husband. "Is taking him home." The elderly woman wiped away a tear. "You saved us." Emily shook her head. "You looked after each other." The couple quietly embraced her before leaving the department hand in hand. No cameras followed them. No reporters noticed. It was enough. Outside, television crews remained behind police barriers. Reporters spoke into microphones while helicopters filmed the damaged entrance from above. Everyone wanted the same story. Who had stopped the gunmen? How had so many hostages survived? Why had the casualties been so low? Hospital administrators declined interviews. Police referred questions to federal authorities. Federal authorities declined comment. The answers remained behind closed doors. Exactly where Emily preferred them. The older government official returned briefly before leaving the hospital. Emily found him standing near the employee exit. "You came to say goodbye." He smiled. "I did." She adjusted the strap of her backpack. "Is there paperwork?" "There always is." "I expected that." He looked toward the parking lot. "The reports are already circulating." "I imagined they would." "They're calling your actions exceptional." Emily shook her head gently. "They're calling the outcome exceptional." He nodded. "Fair correction." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he asked quietly, "Any regrets?" Emily thought about the frightened little girl, the wounded security officer, the terrified young gunman who had almost pulled the trigger, the nurses who had refused to abandon their patients, the doctors who had continued treating the injured while rifles pointed at them. Finally, she answered, "I wish nobody had died." "So do I. I wish hospitals never became battlefields." "So do I." He smiled sadly. "But they don't ask our permission." Emily looked toward the emergency department entrance. "No, they never do." He reached into his coat and removed a small sealed envelope. No ceremony. She accepted it. No speeches. "You've always disliked speeches." She smiled. "You noticed." "I've noticed for years." She slipped the envelope into her backpack without opening it. "What is it?" "Transfer documents." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm finally off probation." He laughed quietly. "Hospital probation." She smiled for the first time that morning. I'll take that. As he walked away, he stopped once more. Carter. She turned. You never told them. They didn't need the details. They'll probably figure some of it out. Maybe. And if they ask. Emily looked back through the glass doors. Inside, nurses hurried between patients. Stretchers rolled down hallways. Someone laughed softly at the nurse's station. Life had returned. She answered without looking away. I'll tell them I was lucky enough to learn from good people. The older man nodded. I believe you would. He entered the waiting vehicle, and the convoy quietly departed. Inside the emergency department, the day shift was arriving. Fresh faces, fresh uniforms, fresh coffee cups. A young nurse approached Linda nervously. It's my first day. Linda smiled. You'll be fine. She looked across the room toward Emily. Fine, Nurse Carter. The young nurse nodded. Why? Linda watched Emily helping a patient adjust a blanket. Because if you want to learn how to stay calm, watch what she does. Emily accepted the new patient's chart. She introduced herself exactly as she had the night before. The end.